Welcome to the pod focusing on the aftermath and recovery from the devastating Palisades fires of January 2025. Journalist Joel Pollack, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and technology expert Ron Goldschmidt serve up to the moment vital news and information, discuss the ongoing recovery efforts, and introduce us to the individuals and trades who are playing key roles in rebuilding our cherished communities. We're diving into the deep end and learning quickly how we can move forward together. We know the pain because we're living real-time news, stories, resources, and insights on the ongoing recovery effort. Buckle up. We're three homeless guys.
Welcome to Three Homeless Guys, the podcast about the Palisades fire and the rebuilding effort. I'm journalist Joel Pollack here with technology expert Ron Goldschmidt and entrepreneur Oren Ezra. And we're pleased to welcome once again Republican gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton, who I happened to meet in the green room of Trace Gallagher's show on Fox News last night. And we had a great time. And we said, let's have a conversation. And some neighbors who are very enthusiastic supporters of yours also reached out and said we should talk again. So welcome back, Steve.
It's great to be here. Now, so here's the thing, Joel. I'm assuming you're still in Los Angeles.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, so since we last saw each other, I have driven up to Mariposa in the Sierra Nevada foothills and back down to Coalinga in the Central Valley. So I don't know how many hundreds of miles it is, but we're putting them in our bid to save our beautiful state.
Well, you're definitely doing the work, the legwork, and that's what you have to do. You know, when I was involved in political campaigns, they would always tell the candidate, you have to go door to door and shake hands and knock on doors. And political candidates never understand that. And it actually doesn't make sense from a certain point of view because you can only meet a few people. I mean, if you're trying to run in a congressional district of 500,000 people or whatever it is now, You're not going to meet 500,000 people. If you took 10 years, you probably wouldn't meet 500,000 people. But the point is that people want to see that you're working.
Yeah. So. The version that we've got going on, which is actually really successful, and I want to talk about this the whole time, obviously get to the substantive issues, but it's very cool actually. We've started this town hall series, which is different to, often I've been doing Republican events, which I love doing, Lincoln Reagan dinners, all that kind of stuff, Republican women, very high energy groups always. But these are town halls, which are open to everyone, and we're doing them all over the state. That was Mariposa today. And, hundreds of people come to these. It's really cool. And you get such thoughtful questions. Some of them are familiar from place to place, and that tells you something. But there's always something that you learn from the questions. And I'm really gaining a lot from it in terms of my understanding of what's important to people. And every single one, there's something new that I'm learning to follow up on, a policy I need to dig into, or a way of, a sort of focus that people want me to address. It's really great. And then so that is quite efficient because you go all over the state, but you're meeting hundreds of people each time.
Amazing. Well, we are speaking here on the day of the California Post's story, and of course I have my California Post hat, story about President Trump signing an executive order essentially taking over the permitting process in the Palisades fire and the Eden fire burn zones. And Oren and Ron and I discussed it for a few minutes right after the news broke. And I want to get your reaction to it. There are lots of different reactions. Gavin Newsom, our governor, said that he may as well be issuing permits on Mars. And Karen Bass said that we need money and we need ice out of Los Angeles rather than permits and whatever. but what is your reaction?
So first of all, what a disgrace for the political leadership in California that this is considered to be necessary. And it is necessary. You don't have to take President Trump's word for it. You take the community's word for it. I mean, I was there on the 7th of January, on the 1-year anniversary in the Palisades. And again, I make this point all over the state, actually, to really capture the intensity of the feeling. The title of that event was "They Let Us Burn." They let us burn. I mean, just that statement itself captures something of the rage, and the combination and the rage directed both at the run up to the fires and the reason that and the terrible response, but also on the rebuilding and the permitting and all these things that were promised, and the fact that it's necessary for some kind of action of this kind. And I'd love to get into your sense of what the specifics are, but I mean, it takes me back to something that I noted at the time, I can't remember if this had happened the last time we were talking, but this was something that Karen Bass said. I think it was 4 or 5 months into the process, and she did a press conference, and on social media, she put out a clip, and the words on the post, the X post, not the California post, the X post were, "I have just signed an executive order streamlining permitting so we can rebuild in Los Angeles." And that, okay, I remember thinking, good, executive order, speeding things up, fantastic, streamlining permitting. But then I watched the clip of what she actually said. And the words that she spoke were, "I have just signed an executive order tasking agency heads with developing paths forward to streamlining permitting." And I thought, there you have it. That's it. That's why nothing happens. Because these people like Newsom and Bass and all these Democrats that you get after 16 years now of one-party rule, they're process people. They're not people of action. They think that initiating a bureaucratic process is the same as action, and that's why we're in such a mess. And so it's shame on them that this is even considered necessary. And you're hearing that from the community. We got all the facts about the tiny number of permits and people giving up and trying to sell their property and the small numbers and all that. You know, how can they point to anything other than a total failure? And so it's all very well to kind of attack the president, but what are they doing about it?
Well, you know, just to point out, there are plenty of Republicans who like to send things to committees also. It's a bipartisan.
Oh, I totally agree.
You know,
yeah, I really do agree. And that's a great observation, which I strongly agree with.
So, all right, let's talk about the broader context. So the president has moved in, and people have criticisms. They say, well, it's not the permitting, it's this problem, it's that problem. From my point of view, what's really important is that somebody finally has taken responsibility. And it's actually a burden the president's putting on himself. He's basically saying, I own this now, and I'm accountable to you for how well this goes. I mean, Oren and Ron, I think that was our feeling this morning, that someone's finally come in. And do you guys want to reiterate that?
Yeah, it's something that we've been asking for really since the beginning of this process, because we very quickly realized that this process has no father and no mother in LA. And so everybody's kind of like pointing fingers and saying, yes, you know, taking quick hits on press releases, on victory laps that shouldn't occur. And so we've kind of been asking for federal intervention for a year. And, you know, my mind goes to, in terms of the executive order, not only just to the permitting issue, but also to the funding issue, which remains very, very large here, because a lot of the folks in the Palisades and Malibu are not at permitting yet, not just because of the stalled permitting process, but also because of the funding issue, unable to draw on their SBA loans, unable to settle their insurance cases with a very, very messed up insurance process. So the executive order also called into affect a couple of those points, and that's something that I would love to see how the federal government kind of chimes in on.
And Oren, did you want to say something? Because I've got a reaction to that, but I'd love to hear what you think. I mean, you're all there. You know this better than anyone.
Yeah, so like, you know, I think that since day one, we realized that like there is nobody there. Nobody was there on January 1st to put on the fire. Nobody was there, and literally nobody was there on January 7th, as Mayor Bass was not here. And the water was not there, and the reservoir were empty. And I think the only process that worked really quickly and great is the EPA, right, Joel? We were talking about it earlier today, that they were able to do a task of 90 days. That was like really like 90 days was a hard task to get, and they did it in 28 days when the president asked for it to be 30 days. And until today, I think I haven't seen anything from our governor, our mayor. I did see some help from like the county, at least like some desire to help. It's still getting stuck. I'm hearing a lot of people from the county side that are getting stuck with their permits. And I think that by Trump hopping in and coming to help us is like you said, Joel, he's taking another headache on himself, and he's taking the responsibility. and I think this will lead to our next conversation about California and how California is being run.
Yes.
But obviously, nobody is running it. And look at the deficit, look at like so many other things that we should talk about. But I think this is a direct connection. I don't know what the governor is doing. He's probably busy with his $30,000 portrait, and I'm coming like originally I'm from Israel. If Bibi would, in the middle of a war, and we're in the middle of a war, we are in a war to building our neighborhood back. If Bibi would spend $30,000 right now on like doing his portrait, I promise you that people would like go into his house and like kick him out of his chair, and the elections would be happening tomorrow. It won't happen, and this is what I don't get. Like, how come?
Well, we're going to kick them out in November. I mean, that's the point of this election. But I mean, I just think this is a really important point because it goes to how. And actually, it is exactly your point, Joel, about it's not just partisan. Actually, I mean, I've really seen this, which is you've got to have a business mindset to make anything happen in government. And most of my career has been in business, but I've also worked in the government. I worked in 10 Downing Street as senior advisor to the Prime Minister, and I saw firsthand that unless you've got this absolutely relentless focus on action, a bias towards action, and a focus on it, you pick up the phone. This is what I learned in business. And, I was project manager for a construction company. I've started businesses of my own. I've got a lot of different kinds of it. I ran restaurants, all of these different types of things. That it's not complicated. It's not some great management guru, anything. It's just being practical. And you hear about something. Let's say you're sitting and thinking there's a situation presented to you. There's a problem. Instead of asking someone to look into it, or setting up a process, or calling for an event, you just pick up the phone and call the actual person, or whoever. It's just that sense of just getting on with it in a practical way. And to some people, that's instinctive. To me, that's instinctive. And obviously for Trump, because that's what he does. I remember interviewing in the first administration the health secretary, Alex Azar, and we were talking about various things. And then off camera, that's what he was telling me about. Trump's style was just a relentless focus on action and outcomes. And he said, and he never forgets things. And, he would saying, he gets certain obsessions, cutting prescription drug prices, I think was one of them. And he was saying, Trump just like, he calls you. He said, what are you doing? And he doesn't give up until you get a specific answer and a time commitment. Okay, 3 months, right. 3 months later, it's sort of 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, the president's on the phone. You told me that the drug prices would be done by now. Are they? What's happening? It's that attitude that's missing, because you've got these machine politicians like Newsom and Bass, and they're just not how they're wired. They couldn't even begin to operate like that. That's not who they are. Their skill set, if you can call it that, is managing the political environment. So the constituencies in the party, the unions, the activists, the media. That's what they're good at. They don't understand action. That's why nothing happens. That's why what we've seen in the Palisades, and the fight, it's absolutely symptomatic of why California's in such a mess. It really is. It shows the whole world how useless they are at actually governing.
I think you touched a very.
Go ahead, Oren. Yeah.
No, I think you touched, Steve, something that is very important for the sake of the conversation. I think that you said unions, right? Now, think about it, California, and again, this conversation is not about politics. I know that you definitely have your politics view, but for me, it's not about politics. It's not about culture war. It's not about vibes. It's just like pure math, right? California feels like an empire. California is the fourth biggest economy in the world. We're bigger than Germany. We're almost as big as Japan, if I'm not mistaken. We're at like $4.1 trillion GDP, right? We have Silicon Valley, we have Hollywood, we have like amazing sources of income. This year alone, the deficit is about $18 billion. We're in like total deficit of $300 billion, right? We all understand that like this, the reason why California will until now stayed blue is because of unions.
Yeah.
Like let's talk for instance for a second about the unions, right? In California, when a teacher he retires when he's on the age of 55 years old. I don't know if you guys know, but usually between 54 to 55, a lot of the teachers get to do a lot of extra hours. Why? Because their pension is being like determined according to their last year. And then for the rest of their life, they're getting another like 25, 30 years of amazing pension. Amazing. I love it. I'm all in, like all forward for it. But it's another like $2 to $3 million per teacher that like leaves. And those kind of unions are the unions that holding basically California by the ball. So like I really want us to like and Joel and Steve, both of you guys, and Ron, three of you guys probably have like way more information than I have about these things, because I'm just like starting to read about this, and suddenly I feel that like, you know, I'm walking in the, like with something on my head. I'm like, guys,
Well, I've got a very specific story.
this is going to go bankrupt unless something like dramatic is going to happen over here.
Sorry,
And
can I
sorry,
just-
one last thing, Steve. The irony of it is if California is going bankrupt, and this is something that Ron and Joel explained me last week, is like if California is going to go bankrupt, who is going to pay the pension for these people? I don't think like the federal will come. Trump will come and say, "Oh, let's pay all these teacher pensions right now."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, it's totally corrupt. I mean, that's the point. It's a corrupt relationship because the unions fund the politicians. The politicians are the puppets of the unions. In so many ways that plays out. For example, in 2014, I believe, there was maybe I'm getting the date wrong, but around that time, there was a ballot initiative that was designed to reform the pension system. To avoid some of these things. And if that had happened over a decade ago, then the fiscal impact would be nothing like what it is now. It'd still be bad, but it would be much better. And it was totally misdescribed on the ballot. The actual phrase, the language describing it was completely distorted to make it sound like something else, because Kamala Harris, who's then the Attorney General, gets to write the language on the ballot. And she's, of course, funded by the unions just like everyone else. So they keep, this is how they keep their power. I'll give you a specific story. I mean, and there's so many stories, just like your teacher thing. We set up in the wake of the Minnesota fraud scandal erupting last November in the campaign around Thanksgiving, we set up a fraud hotline, califraud.com, to get tips, because one of the big features of the Minnesota situation was a lot of whistleblowers, and Tim Waltz and the machine were silencing them and so on. So I wanted to see if we could get some interesting information. We got hundreds and hundreds of tips. A huge proportion of the tips that came in were pension fraud, public sector pension fraud. Things like you're describing there. It's widespread and rampant. There's this whole thing called DROP, which is an acronym, DROP. I can't remember what it stands for. Where towards the end of your working life, you kind of resign, you start claiming your pension, then you're rehired, so you're being paid pension and salary at the same time. I mean, there's all these things. The other thing in teachers is job description inflation. So they give you a higher title. Even though your job is the same, that goes with a higher pension, on and on. There's all of this. And then more broadly, not just on the pension situation, but in terms of control over policy. One of the things, I'm switching to the housing issue. One of the reasons that housing is so expensive in California, it costs 3 or 4 times as much to build any given property compared to a neighboring state. Just the cost of construction, partly that's materials, and we can talk about that, but a big part of it is labor. Is the labor cost. Why? Because in so many of these situations, the unions, and this is now private sector unions, not government unions, they file lawsuits using the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, as a pretext to file a lawsuit as leverage to negotiate what are called project labor agreements, which then they force onto the house builder, which has 2 components usually. They call it prevailing wage and skilled and trained. They both sound very nice, sound very reasonable. Skilled and trained means union labor only, like a closed shop, which I thought, I can't believe that still happens in America. In England, Mrs. Thatcher got rid of that in the early 80s. Then you have prevailing wage, again, sounds very nice. It's 3 or 4 times the market wage rate. So, of course, that massively increases the costs. I tried to do a ballot initiative many years ago to reform this. I remember a meeting in Sacramento when I was trying to we didn't get the money to put it on the ballot. I was trying to advance it through the legislature. This meeting is almost the reason I'm running for governor, because I just thought, I can't believe what I've just heard. I was in a meeting with a legislator who was a Democrat, who was considered to be good on housing. And we had this conversation, and there's another component to my ballot initiative on impact fees, taxes on house building. Anyway, this person said, "Oh, this is would be transformational, what you're proposing." I said, "Oh, fantastic. Let's work on it together. Bipartisan, that's a nice thing." And they said, "No, I couldn't support it publicly." I said, "Why not?" They said, "Well, the unions would hate it." I said, "Yeah, I know, but so what?" I just remember we were up in the office overlooking the Capitol, and they did this with their arm. They waved their hand around and said, "Well, the unions run this place." I thought, wait a minute, you're an elected legislator, and you just told me that.
Well, they believe that they won't get re-elected unless they have the unions on their side.
Yeah,
and
they
more,
completely,
and more broadly,
they accept it. They never challenge it. They just accept
Yeah.
it. They get the money. They get not just the money, the donations. It's also the activism, the ballot harvesting, and going round neighborhoods, all that kind of stuff. The muscle, the union membership going out there and helping them with their campaigns. They are the puppets of the unions.
But the unions are going to be the biggest losers from this. Everybody that sits on pensions, once California go bankrupt, who is going to pay them? No, this is, I think, the main thing. The people of the unions need to understand, if you continue with an $18 billion deficit per year, you're not going to have money. Even somebody can promise you whatever he wants. He's not going to have the money to pay you.
Of course you're right, but look at but there's no reason with them, because here's what their response is: "Oh, we need to have higher taxes. The rich must pay their fair share." Hence the billionaires tax that's just been proposed by one of the unions, SEIU, because they can see. And so their answer to everything is, we can just raise taxes. That
what
really
gets
is
me
their
about
answer.
what gets me about this billionaire tax? I mean, yes, it's crazy to tax wealth. It's just crazy. It's socialist. It's communist. Yes, it's also crazy the amount of fraud and waste in government, and you want to clean that up before you think about raising more revenue, because you could probably find the money you're looking for if you just got rid of the fraud and the waste. But the other thing is this idea that we absolutely have to take whatever money comes in and put it into healthcare is amazing to me, because first of all, there's the issue of who's getting this quote-unquote free healthcare. So Governor Newsom had to cut off new entrants into the Medi-Cal system who are not legally in the United States. He offered free, quote-unquote, medical care to everybody at the beginning of 2024, and eventually it almost made the whole system insolvent, so he had to stop that. Those who already signed up can have it. Those who haven't yet can't join. But nobody stops to say, why do we have runaway healthcare costs? I mean, why is this a bottomless pit of spending? And we've talked about unions, and I'm perfectly happy to talk about the problems they cause. How about the successful lobbies for industries that make sure that every Obamacare plan covers certain drug treatments and certain medical treatments, but doesn't touch others? I mean, you've got special interests on that side as well. And I'm not by any sense, on the left side of the issue in particular, but I mean, when Obama needed to pass Obamacare, he got $150 million from the pharmaceutical industry to push it through on the condition that he not touch their profits. And so, you've got this bottomless pit of healthcare costs, and it's just, I don't see it ever ending. I mean, we're going to pour our entire country's wealth into healthcare. It's crazy.
Well, look, Joel, you're right, and that's a true populist position in the real sense. And I just want to speak to that directly. Just one thing however, even on the illegal immigrant healthcare, it's interesting if you look at the budget. So you're right that he's restricted new enrollees and actually removed some benefits, some entitlement. I think dentists, dental or something. However, in the budget, the actual spending on the free healthcare for illegal immigrants is going up from last year to this year, up from like 9 billion to nearly 13 billion. So even though he's restricted the enrollees, their spending is still going up. You're totally right about this. I mean, if you look at just very instructive. The famous French laundry dinner. Who was there at that dinner? The doctor's lobbyist in Sacramento. When I was doing my Fox show on Fox News, we had a segment that was there on day one called Swamp Watch, which was exposing corruption. And mostly it was the kind of thing you're describing. In fact, the first week we did the Finance Committee in Congress, which was known as the Cash Committee, because basically it's the committee that regulates Wall Street. And so everyone wanted to be on it because you get more donations from it than anybody on anything else. They actually had to add an extra row of seats to build in because so many members wanted to be on it. But then the following 3 weeks, I did a series on the healthcare industry. I did the hospitals, pharmaceuticals, and insurance, and the total corruption, where, again, they own the legislators, so that's completely right. And there's no accountability for the spending. So you get massive overbilling, and there's no incentive for anyone to control costs, and everyone gets paid off. So the doctors are given all these lavish freebies by the insurance, by the pharmaceutical, and then they prescribe all the medicines totally unnecessarily, and then the insurance companies end up paying it, and the government bails them out. It's totally out of control.
I'll tell you a funny story about that. It's not a funny story. It's, I guess, somewhat amusing. But my mother-in-law, who passed away from cancer, was prescribed a medicine. I think the medicine cost $18,000. And there was a whole question about whether insurance would even cover it and so forth. That's a separate issue. What was really galling about it was that it was the wrong medicine. That if you actually looked at the kind of cancer she had, it wasn't even going to respond to that drug had she taken it. I mean, and that's the kind of thing that happens all the time. You talk about overbilling. I mean, there's just no, it's a runaway train. So I think we have a lot of things like that. We also have a train that will never run away, which is the high-speed rail, which isn't going anywhere. And so I think you're talking a lot of sense. Let me ask you this, though. You're running as governor. Let's assume you win. You're going to face the same problem Arnold Schwarzenegger faced, which is that you have a legislature that is dominated by Democrats. They have a supermajority, and they can override any veto that you would sign. And you have appointments, you have certain executive powers, and so forth. But what's the possibility that you could bring to that office? I mean, how are you going to change things when you're actually going to have very, very little power?
Well, it's more than people think. Let me go through it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, this is the central question. The two central questions, I try and answer them even if I'm not asked proactively at all these town halls. Is number one, how are you going to win? Number two, what can you get done even if you win? So let's get into the second one. The first point is that even on the vetoes, I just want to point out that the volume of legislation that they're passing, completely unchecked effectively by Gavin Newsom. He just stops a handful that he thinks will be bad for him politically. I mean, last year we did a whole event on it. We printed out all the bills they passed just last session. They passed 1,118 bills just in one session. You have to just explain that to people. That's like 3 for every day of the year if the legislature was working every single day, 365 days a year, but they're not even in session. Insane. It's an insane amount. They just churn it out. They have all these ridiculous tricks and things that would just horrify you. Like they
don't read it. There's nobody reads it. It's a machine, basically.
No, but isn't the thing they these things that were basically they pass blank bills. They have all these little gimmick trailer bills, the blank bills that gut and amend, where they sort of pass something. They go through the process that is defined in terms of public comment and all that kind of stuff and hearings, whatever. And then they just delete it and put something else in that got nothing to do with the original bill. But they've already been through the process, so they don't have to repeat it. I mean, it's just endless things like that. They literally vote on blank bills and fill them in later. It's just extraordinary how bad it is. We printed them all out. The joke I always make is, I'm pretty short, but the pile of bills just from that one session is twice my height. No one's reading this. It's all done by these lobbyists in Sacramento. It's completely corrupt. You're right that they can override a veto, but that takes time. They have to go through a process. So if I veto everything, which basically I'd love to do, everything that doesn't reduce costs and make things easier for businesses and families, it takes time for them to override. You have to vote. You can at least slow it all down. But the real point is the executive branch. And we talked about this yesterday at the Doge, the launch of CalDoge. There's over 240 agencies, thousands of appointments in many. And what you've got to understand is, not you, me as the candidate, a prospective governor has to understand how it works. And that's why I do think I have an advantage here, because I really have had this range of experience, including encountering and trying to fight a bureaucracy. Now, of course, it's not the same. The UK government is about the same size, but it's different, of course. But the mentality, the understanding how hard it is to actually make change happen, how aggressive you have to be, and how you have to really understand the tricks of the bureaucrats, but also to be prepared. That's the lesson, of course, from the second Trump administration versus the first one. And that's the kind of work I'm doing now. I mean, the CalDoge thing, for example, yesterday, it wasn't just a kind of nice announcement. It was actually, I've recruited people to run it, and they are currently, they're working right now voluntarily. And and I'll just point to one, there's two parts to the CalDoge announcement. One is fraud and the kind of audit function of identifying fraudulent, wasteful, abusive spending. But the second part is the government structural reform. And this is something that Arnold Schwarzenegger commissioned. It was called the California Performance Review 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, knowing that, but even then, the bureaucracy in Sacramento was completely out of control, bloated, clogging everything up with ridiculous regulations and overlapping jurisdictions, and businesses having to deal with 7 different agencies and all the time, all this kind of nonsense. State overlapping with regional, with county, with local, just crazy amounts of government and bureaucracy back then. So they had this process. They had thousands of recommendations. And they had a whole process for completely simplifying government. They called it blowing up the boxes. And none of it was implemented because he didn't want to take on the vested interest. Maybe it's towards the end of his administration. I've just hired the guy who did that, a guy called Paul Miner. He's now doing it for me. He's going to update the work. And I really am committed to doing it, because nothing's going to change unless we do it. So, and then I just want to I know I'm talking a lot, but I've thought about it a lot. So I'm working through the issues and seeing where can you make change happen just through executive action. Here are a couple of examples. We have the insanity of the energy policy, which means that we're shutting down the oil industry in California and Kern County. We're not using much less oil. We're just now importing 80% of it, with our number one supplier being Iraq. And we're shipping it in on giant supertankers halfway around the world, spewing out carbon emissions. That's all insane. That's why the gas price is so high. That's why the refineries are closing, because the refineries are designed and built to process California crude. Now that that's fallen so low, there's no business for them. So we have to open up California oil production. How are you going to do that? It's not the legislature that's shutting down the oil industry. It's an agency called CalGEM, Geologic and Energy Management. And Gavin Newsom has given them the orders to not issue permits for all the business of drilling for oil. Maintaining existing wells, expanding existing wells that are near the end of their life so you can get more oil out of them, drilling new wells in existing fields. I've been to the oil fields. Half the oil wells aren't working. It's not because there's no oil there, it's because they're not being given permits by CalGEM. That's just a question of kicking out the climate lunatics from that agency, putting in pro-energy people and telling them to issue every single permit. And working with the industry, my conversations with them suggest that we can double California oil production every 2 years without any recourse to the legislature. And so, there's issue after issue where if you work through the issue and you really understand what levers you can pull in the government, you can actually make a pretty quick difference.
It's amazing. I have one question before I throw it back to the other guys. Obviously, to do all this, you have to win. So let me offer you a suggestion, and you can reject it if you like. But the only way a Republican can win for governor is if that Republican's running against another Republican. Because once we get through this crazy top 2 primary system, for those who don't know, we don't have a system where the Republicans nominate their candidate and the Democrats nominate their candidate. All the candidates are in one pool, and the top 2 vote recipients go to the general election regardless of party. And it has happened, usually in congressional races, that you have 2 Democrats in the final general election in November, or 2 Republicans, less frequently. And right now, you and Chad Bianco are number 1 and number 2, sometimes number 2 and number 1 in all the various polls. Yes. And the Democrats, hungry for power, are all jumping into the gubernatorial election and diluting the Democratic vote so that you guys continue to lead, and these smaller minnows with a D after their names continue to dilute the vote. that may not last. I don't know. But I was wondering if you would consider some kind of electoral pact with Chad Bianco where you say, okay, we're going to tell people, if you have a family that votes Republican, let the husband vote for me and the wife vote for you, and make sure that both of us are number one and number two. Because what the Democrats are going to do is they're going to try to pick off one of you, and then they're going to just try to get past that one. And they know that if they can get past the one of you, even if the other one qualifies, they're going to win in the general election, because the voters of California, and I love California, but the voters of California, like the voters of any partisan state, will basically vote for whoever the dominant party nominee is, regardless of who they are or what they are. They could be a melted popsicle, basically, and they'd still win the election. So, you're very impressive, but I don't want all this fantastic work to go to waste. So is there some electoral pact you'd consider with Chad Bianco?
So look, I think that scenario, I do understand, and you're right. That's been pretty consistent actually for the last few months, at least 2 months. I think that's been the pattern. Chad and I very close at the top in the 1 and 2 slots. Sometimes he's 1 and I'm 2, and vice versa, and very close. You're right. I cannot imagine that the Democratic Party, especially driven by the unions, will allow that to continue. In other words, my expectation is that they will, and there's still a they. There's still a machine there. Nancy Pelosi still has an important role. They listen to her. They'll just tell people to get out. They'll offer them other jobs. They won't allow it to happen. Right now, you've got a bunch of very, candidates who've got no chance. Betty Yee, Tony Thurman, they're all on like 2, 3, 4%. So they'll be told to get out. That you've got the leading contenders, basically right now is 3 people. Eric Swalwell, Katie Porter, Tom Steyer. Tom Steyer, they won't be able to do anything with because he's a billionaire. He'll do whatever he wants. So they're stuck with that. But I'm very confident that they will. The big unions have yet to endorse anyone. They've just been having their beauty parades, and everyone's going running around sucking up to them. And I think that 2 things will happen. They will consolidate behind the union's preferred candidate, and as they've done in the past, they will try and pick their opponent. So they will try and boost the Republican who they would prefer to run against in the general election. And that's what's disgusting about this whole top 2 system. It ends up with these kind of cynical these games being played. But I don't really see any alternative, truthfully, than just making my argument and saying, here's my vision, here's my plan, here are my qualifications. We've got to change. And I think that actually, the one thing I really wouldn't agree with you about is that, let's just imagine I'm in the top 2 against Katie Porter or Eric Swalwell. I think that's a winnable race because everyone can see that there's change. I mean, if you look at the polling on the state of opinion in California, over 60%, very consistently in these surveys, 60%, 62, 65, say that the state's going in the wrong direction. In other words, it's a change election, as they say. And so when you've got really unimpressive, unattractive candidates on their side, which is what we've got, I think it's winnable. I really do. And there's an argument that I make to Democrats and independents, which is, look, you don't have to become a Republican. You don't have to be a Republican. We all agree we need change. And even if, you don't love the idea of a Republican, all we're saying is that one-party rule is just not healthy. It's not good for democracy, which they love to talk about so much. It's time for a bit of balance. They'll still run the legislature. They'll still run the big cities and the counties. A bit of balance. When I make that argument, people nod along. So I think we've got every chance of winning against a Democrat. I really do.
I think that, Ron, you want to say something?
I just wanted to double click on the Doge initiative and kind of get your gauge on what percentage of the budget do you believe is actually can be cut, and how much of it is attributable to waste, fraud, abuse, all of those things that we know are very rife in the system. And it's a 2-part question. One is what's the goal of the Doge initiative, and what's kind of the target down the road, and B, why do you think that all of this abuse? Because we speak to people all the time. It seems like there's a lot of outrage about these issues, yet there's nobody that's actually willing to vote any different than the interests that are in power right now, and which are essentially wasting all of this money. So the homelessness the homelessness NGOs and all of the homeless industrial complex, all of that money that's getting wasted. Yet people like don't seem to be outraged enough. How is that possible? And you've canvassed up and down the state. Tell us, like, is that changing on the ground?
Well, I think it's our job to change, my job to change it. And I think that there's a kind of critical mass now behind this fraud argument, prompted by Minnesota. And you can see the Post is, doing so much on it with Joel and his team. And it's just it's just grabbing public attention. And the thing that it really captures in California, it starts to answer that question. How is it that we pay the highest taxes in the country and yet have the worst outcomes? I mean, the list of the areas where we're the highest cost for this, that, and the other, everything that matters, but also the highest poverty rate, the highest unemployment rate, the homelessness, the schools are a disaster. It's just this. We pay the most and get the least. The more they take, the less we get. People really feeling that strongly. Going back to the Doge thing, I'll give you just it's a fact, which is if you look at the budget of the state of California, in the last 5 years, they have nearly doubled the budget. Nearly doubled. It was gone from about 180 billion to the one he just passed, nearly 350 billion. Doubled. And what's actually happened is that the pandemic spending has got baked into the baseline. All that uplift and it's just out of control. So I remember looking at this when I was putting together my tax plan, right at the beginning of the campaign, before I'd even, just for my launch. I thought I want to have that clearly there. And I was looking at something realistic for taxes, which was, I don't want to kind of make a promise that's just ridiculous, abolish all income tax. Actually Chad Bianco saying, I just think, it's not realistic. It's half the revenue. You can't just do that in one go. So I wanted to think carefully about what's a tax plan that would really, address the key things. And the number one is the people who've been really squeezed and hurt the most by all this, working class Californians, working people who don't earn very much and have all these incredibly high costs for gas, electric, rent, etc. And so the first plank of my tax plan was your first 100 grand, no state income tax, which helps about 7 million households. I mean, of course it helps everyone because it's, even if you earn over that, you're tax free on that amount, but it particularly helps the working class. And then above 100,000, a flat tax of 7.5%, which is a big reduction. I mean, the top rate now is 13.3%. But that's first of all, we've got to simplify. It's so complicated and ridiculous. That itself is a barrier to growth and enterprise or whatever. So flat tax of 7.5%. You put that together. Back then, when we did, based on the budget a year ago, that was an 18.5% reduction in revenue. So roughly 60 billion in spending cuts to make that possible, which it's a lot, but they've doubled the budget. So my immediate goal is to find $60 billion worth of savings so we can make that cut. I actually think the real answer to your question in terms of what is doable is really half of it. But that's not going to. There's so much now baked in it. That's not realistic to do in one go. But the goal of of CalDoge is actually twofold. One is to find those savings in the fraud, the obviously egregious fraud and corruption, and some of that is already happening because of Bill Asaley's prosecutions from the U.S. Attorney's Office in terms of the homeless spending. Just the other week we had that story. One guy, $27 million completely stolen, and so it's finding things like that where we can cut the spending. And the really important factor in that is the office of the state controller, which no one pays attention to, but it's one of the 8 elected statewide positions, and it's a really important part of what I'm doing here with this campaign, which is putting together a team to run together and work together. We've called it the golden ticket. It's never been done before in California. All these offices are independently elected, and they still are, but you've never seen it before where people have running mates. And I've put together a team. So far we've got my lieutenant governor, attorney general candidate, and the state controller candidate. The state controller has the power. It basically has the Doge power. One of the things that was difficult for Elon and the team was how do they get access to the money trail and get into the system. The state controller already has that power in California. The total power to audit any organization receiving state money and to turn off the money, to stop the flow of money. It's very powerful. So
I think it's very
closely together. The second part, I just want to finish this, is that's only one part of it. And I think the original intent of Doge if you look back at what was written, even before, soon after the idea was put out there, and it was Vivek and Elon together, a second component of it was government reform, structural reform, asking the question, do we need this department? Why is this being done from Washington? That's what I want to do as well. That's that thing I referred to earlier, the guy Paul Miner who did the performance review for Gavin Newsom. Like most other states have a fraction of the state agencies that California has. So we've got to eliminate huge parts of the government, because it's not just the financial burden of the taxes and the regulatory. It's the operating burden for businesses that have to deal with all this crap coming out of all these agencies. So that's a very important part of CalDoge as well. I want to make sure both of those proceed together.
I think it's very obvious that California doesn't have a revenue problem. California has a structure problem. The problem is a structure. The problem is not like how much money we're bringing in, not even how much money we're taking from like the people, from us, from me, right? We're taking way more than like Florida, and way more than like Texas, and still those places are like in a surplus of, I think, like I don't remember exactly, but $18-20 billion per year, and we were like a deficit, and we're taking more. And I think that an important thing to remember is like, if you pay a lot of taxes, which we don't mind paying a lot of taxes, we want to get great services. And the problem is that we're paying a lot of taxes and we're getting horrible services in California. We're paying a lot of taxes, and if I want to remodel my kitchen, it's almost impossible in terms of like the bureaucracy that I need to go through. I'm running a business in California. I have like 40, 50 employees. I can't even tell you how hard it is to run a business in California. It's like a real pain that people are having. And I think, again, the point that the unions, like I think, Steve, that in order to break the unions, you guys need to repeat it and repeat it. They need to understand that if they continue like to vote like this, that I understand why they prefer voting like this, they are the people that are going to end up with no money in their pension. Because if we continue taking all the billionaires and having them run away from here, yes. What does it make sense? Like the new law, the billionaire law. If the guys from Google need to pay according to their percent, I don't know if you guys realized it. The guys from Google are supposed to pay their taxes on their percentage, their voting percentage. So let's say they own Google at like 20%. Now they need to pay 51% because that's how much voting. They don't have enough money to pay. Even if they want, they cannot pay it. What's going to happen? They're going to leave. All of them are going to leave. So what did you do with this tax?
This is the point. They already have left. And
yes.
This is what's so insane about this. Just the threat of this insane tax has already cost us. I mean, the All In podcast guys estimate it's $1 trillion has already left. Gone, because it's retrospective. Even because the idea is that they get this on the ballot for this November and it's implemented in January 2027, but it applies to January 26. So they've already gone. So we've already lost, even if it never happens, we've already lost billions of dollars of revenue. That's already gone.
So the people that sitting right now, like in the governor office, don't understand that that's what they're going to cause. I don't get it. Like, why would they do so?
Listen. I mean, I'll give you sorry, Steve, to jump in. I mean, one of the reasons the California Post is necessary is that there is no alternative perspective in the media in California. It's just they're not aware. I mean, I'll pick one example. The governor has a spokesman named Izzy Garden, and he basically runs the governor's press office troll account. It's supposed to be a publicly funded account, but it's basically a trolling account. So he takes it so far, partly because the only feedback he gets is from within his political echo chamber. And look, the same happens on the right as well. You know, Trump tells jokes that I don't like sometimes, and people think they're funny because they don't hear from other people why they might be offensive. But with Garden, he put up a picture of Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu on the day Trump spoke in the Knesset in Israel. And it was the day they announced the hostages were being released. And this guy was so unaware of the emotive importance of the hostage issue that he put a picture up of Trump and Netanyahu shaking hands or embracing or something. And he then put a picture up from the movie Dumb and Dumber. So we had Trump and Netanyahu and then Dumb and Dumber. And enough people must have complained that he eventually took it down. because it's one of the few times the governor's press office has retreated on anything. But it was actually so offensive that here comes a guy. In Israel, it's nonpartisan. Like nobody, left, right, they just want the hostages home. And it was like that. I was at both the Democratic and Republican conventions in 2024, and they had hostage families speaking at both of them. So it was a nonpartisan issue in the United States as well. And I think this guy just didn't realize, like, the left hates Netanyahu, the left hates Trump. I'll put them together in a picture and I'll call them Dumb and Dumber and, ha ha ha. But I think eventually someone poked through the bubble and said, you actually shouldn't do that because they're getting these people out of the tunnels of Gaza where they've been starving for more than 2 years, So
Yes.
I feel like they just don't get any feedback. Nobody
Yes.
tells them this is offensive.
Exactly. And on any of this stuff, or even their ideas. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I'm just in the middle of it, like right now, just before jumping on with you guys. There's a TV debate happening next week, Wednesday.
February
hosted
3rd.
by-
Was it
yeah,
3rd?
Fox. Yeah,
I think
exactly.
it's I think it's Tuesday then. Yeah.
Well, next week. It's the
Yeah.
3rd, exactly. Sorry. And it's hosted by Fox, local Fox in the Bay Area, and co-hosted by Fox in LA. But there's a partner, as you often have for these debates, and it's some non-profit, activist non-profit. And there's this questionnaire that they've sent to all the candidates as a condition of participation. Now, I've made a rule of not answering any questionnaires because, for those who don't know, it's the first time I've seen anything like this. You just get bombarded with these questionnaires from every single interest group, all the kind of things you're talking about, every lobbyist group, trade association, union, you name it, right? They all send these questionnaires. And of course, it's a wish list of their demands. And the subtext is, say what we want you to say, and then we might endorse you. That it's totally corrupt. And you can see from the framing of the questions what on all these other questions. So I made a decision at the beginning of the campaign that I wasn't going to do any of them, and that's our policy. We don't do these questionnaires because I'm not interested in pandering to you and about your specific special interest requirements in order to buy your endorsement and give you and promise you what you want. I just think it's corrupt. And I always say we try. I said to my team, let's be polite. So I'm very happy to sit down, have a meeting, have a conversation, whatever you want. But I'm not doing it on these terms. Anyway, this group has just sent this questionnaire. It's laughable. It's just this utterly predictable, hilarious framing of every question through the lens of kind of far leftist ideology that is so funny when you look at it. You just think, what planet are you on? But it shows that it's been this one-party rule for so long. The ideology, the direct, to your point earlier about a revenue problem, it's not even considered that we actually maybe it's all about which taxes will you increase? Would you be open to this tax increase or that tax increase? There isn't even an option that says which taxes would you cut. It's just hilarious because this is what you get from one-party rule all these years, 16 years now. No challenge. There's no argument in the other direction. In the legislature, the Republicans are irrelevant because it's a 2/3 majority. You don't need to take their views into account on anything. And so they've become so arrogant and complacent and in their bubble, ideologically, culturally, as you're pointing out in relation to the trolling of Newsom and his team. It's just that's what you get. They're completely unchallenged. And that's why I think that when we get into the campaign, and the general election campaign, it's not really happening now because we're not really facing off against each other. I truly believe I'll be able to take these people apart because they've got nothing to say. Their record is totally disastrous. Like, it's a complete failure on every front, what they've done. They got nothing. They cannot justify any of it, and they have no plans to change it. They've got platitudes, and all they've got is attacking Trump. And so I think that they haven't really faced a challenge. And they certainly haven't faced anyone like me. And I'm really excited about, taking them apart in the general election.
Well, I really think that you're doing a service to everybody simply by running and getting these ideas out there. And I hope you can be as successful as it is possible to be. I do think that the only way for a Republican to win is to have two Republicans in the general. So you got to find some way of doing it. I mean, I know that campaigns are always scrambling for money, especially Republican campaigns in states like California, but you should find a way, you and Chad, to give money to each other or something. Make sure that you're, you guys are, I mean, otherwise it's just not going to be a change. I mean, I haven't seen any agenda. By the way, this is open to any Democrats. We've had Democrats on this podcast, and any of the Democratic candidates want to come on. I've actually tried to get Antonio Villaraigosa on many times, and that's because I met his spokesperson's friend, and I was in touch with them, and they're not interested. I did actually interview him at the Democratic convention, but they haven't come on the podcast. It's open to everybody, and we need everybody's input. And as I read social media in our community, I can see that Democrats who are my neighbors disagree with me 100% or 180 degrees on some of the issues that are big and national. But we're all working together to try to fix our community. And just one point about that. I think the tragedy of the whole ICE situation, whatever side you're on of the ICE issue, is that some of the politicians who were working very well together on the Palisades fire rebuilding are now splitting over this ICE thing. And I feel like we have to just keep the focus. We're going to take sides one way or another, and we want political change in our state, which often means, okay, that means you're going to back a Republican because the Democrats are all in office already. But, I mean, I think that the party names don't matter as much as the agenda. And I'm yet in the governor's race, I'm not seeing any new agenda. Just to give you a sense, I asked Antonio Villaraigosa what his top priority would be. Granted, this was before the fire. But I said to him, what's your top priority as governor going to be? And he said, I want to bring people together, which is about the dumbest answer you could give. I mean, what does it mean to bring people together? I mean, it's it's like so vanilla. And anyway, I've spoken a lot. I want to let you have the last word, and then we need to close out. You've been very, very generous with your time, and we have to have you back.
I've enjoyed it very much. Look, I just think it's very simple. The message is very clear. No change, no chance. There's no chance of fixing these problems unless we change. And I think that is true. And in these campaigns, when you've got something that's just indisputable, that the state's going in the wrong direction, people are suffering, businesses are suffering and leaving, people are leaving, young people, and one of the things that resonates the most when I do these events is like, it's so sad when young people say to themselves, I can't do it in California. If I want that dream of owning my own home, or starting a business, or whatever it may be, I just can't do it here. It's too hard, it's too expensive. I'm going to have to leave, go to Tennessee, Florida, Texas, wherever. And it's such a tragedy, because it's not just that we are losing talent and the next generation, it's just on a human level so sad. Parents don't see their kids, grandparents won't see their grandkids. It's just so sad what's happening. And I think that my whole approach in this campaign is to be incredibly clear, not uncompromising on the fact that we need very big dramatic change, pointing out why the system is so corrupt and broken, but also the actual ideas I'm arguing are really practical, positive, pragmatic things. They're not ideological, they're not divisive, not cultural. All that is like I'll just go through my list. End the Democrat climate crusade so we can have $3 gas and cut your electric bills in half. End the bloat in state budget and the corruption and the fraud, so you have your first $100,000 no state income tax. No free healthcare for illegal immigrants, so we can use that $20 billion to lower healthcare costs and wait times for Californians, and end the insane environmental regulations and labor regulations that give us the highest housing costs in the country, so everyone can have a home they can afford to buy. And that's it. I mean, it's pretty uncontroversial. You could say that the free healthcare for illegal immigrants is, but I mean, actually there's a majority support for that. The Democrats scream about it. I just think that people are tired of all that ideological insanity and just want things to work properly and just life to be less of a struggle. And that is what I'm talking about.
Well, thanks so much, Steve, for being with us again. And we'll have to have you back. Maybe we should just have a debate here on three homeless guys.
Exactly.
Ron, Oren, you want to set it up? We should just invite all the candidates. No questionnaires, except tell us in 100 words or less what you'll do for the Palisades fire. And
no, not just for the Palisades fire. I think that people need to look if we continue working like this in California, just like what happened in France. High taxes, strong union, massive pension obligations, all of these things adding up, and where we're heading. So
exactly.
again,
no, but France is different. They speak French.
Yeah, exactly. And what? We don't understand? We can't put it in like a Google Translate and understand what's going to happen to us? No, but I think that like Steve, what you said is like 100%. I don't think it's about any political opinions or anything like this. It's about like taking a system that is not working properly, that has a lot of money, that we can benefit from it, all of us. The growth could be amazing. Teachers can still retire at age 55 and make like, have an amazing pension. And what you said, like really, like I'm really thinking about it, like have their kids grow up next to them. And they need to understand, these unions need to understand, if you're not doing it like this, your kids are going to leave California. They're not going to live next to you anymore, and you're not going to have the money for your pension. So either you guys, the people of the unions, wake up and change it, or you know what, whatever is happening in the next like few years, you ask for it.
Exactly. All right.
Well, thanks so much. And you can find more of us at 3homelessguys.com. Write to us at pod@3homelessguys.com. And until next time, for Ron, Oren, and myself, Joel, stay strong.
Thanks for listening to 3 Homeless Guys. If this episode hit home, please subscribe to our channel. Check out 3homelessguys.com for RSS feeds to your favorite streaming service. Follow us on social and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Drop us a review or shoot us a message at pod@3homelessguys.com. We'd love to hear from you. Stay strong, and we'll catch you next time.